Welcome, one and all, to the Scott and Loz show.
Welcome.
And a very congenial hello to you, Loz.
Hello, Scott. How are you, kid?
I'm all right, lad. You all right?
It's top, not bottom.
All right. First things first, for those who have listened up until now, the eagle-eyed, or should I say eagle-eared of you may have... Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that because eagle-eared wouldn't work.
Well,
it's their eyesight, isn't it? That's especially acute. Hence the phrase. What animal would I use instead? Has good bats?
Bats, yeah. Bats was my first one.
Moths certainly do. I'll tell you what though. No, go on.
No, I was thinking potentially dolphins, but I think that's amplified by the water more than it is that they're naturally good at hearing.
I think calling someone dolphin-eared is probably more complimentary than moth-eared or bat-eared. I don't know. Yeah, technically, all of them are actually more complimentary than eagle-eared, which was my point. So,
which is just a nonsense.
Let's just try and be diplomatic and say those of sharp hearing may have noticed that I've upgraded my microphone finally. And do you know what, Luz? I had no idea that through the previous 8 episodes and some 9 hours of content, it was actually my laptop's microphone the whole time. Like, you know, the one that's basically a pinprick next to the webcam. Yeah, I thought it was my iPhone earpods that was doing it, but the laptop hadn't recognised them. Sorry, other brands are available.
Indeed.
But I can't believe I sounded that good, to be honest, given that, like, but I can now understand why it was picking up the ambience of the office. So thankfully now I've got a decent Audio Technica headset running into a Focusrite Scarlett Solo M-Box audio interface for those who love a bit of technical jargon.
None of that meant anything to me, but it looked an impressive bit of kit when I saw it.
A bit of tech porn. Is that doing it for you, is it? Oh, do you like it, sir? Oh.
Plug in, sir. Oh.
Yes, yeah. So, so at least the quality has improved there. Can the same be said for the rest of the show, Lars? I mean, was it perfect as it was? I don't know.
I was going to say, can you improve on perfection? Really?
Well, you said it, not me.
We're bloody gonna try.
You sanctimonious bastard.
Yeah.
No, I think is this a new and improved run of episodes, or is it just the same two dicks talking bollocks? Is that what people are tuning in for? I think it's safe to say we won't fundamentally change for anyone, will we?
No.
So I guess it doesn't matter.
We are who we are, and if you don't like it, then you know where the door is.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, we're entering brave new territory here, and I'm really excited. I'm a little bit nervous as well, trepidatious, one might say. My learned colleague, Mr. Hughes here, has a long and varied taste in music and plays at least one instrument, I know, and I myself have dabbled in rap, but you know, I'm far less varied and diverse. Is just another form of varied, but you know, I'm gonna use that as well.
The last thing you want to do is massage my ego at the start of a podcast. You should have done it towards the end. But no, so
I'm also in rare territory as I'm about to do myself down because I as you well know, Scott, I've been a little bit hesitant because, you know, obviously the point of these things is to put your point across, and I hope that I shall do so eloquently. But I'm a little bit worried because my tastes in terms of, you know, the things that I'm going to put on, I'm going to put that album on now to enjoy it. That you might see a pattern emerge. That's all I'm going to say for now. But yeah, I hope you enjoy all the same.
We've just concluded really rather a grand voyage, Lars, haven't we, through the greatest movies of all time, which I'd say probably covered some 50 or so between us, including like my quote unquote mentions, you know, the ones that didn't make the honourable mentions, which didn't make the top 10, because of course we talked about 40 between us, and then I'd say there were at least 10 from me that were just, I wanted to just at least say the name of them. So there was a lot to talk about there, hence 8 episodes and at least as many hours. So yeah, for those who did join us through that voyage, our diehard evergreen fan base. A very a very warm welcome back to you. Our good friends at this point, I think it's safe to say.
Yes,
who,
definitely.
I'm sure would probably feel that you know us quite well by now. Or do you? Because we're now about to venture, as Lars said, into a totally different world, but one equally beloved to both of us, I'd say, which is music. And it's a very broad topic. So me and Lars quickly convened before doing this, and we thought, perhaps maybe being a little bit more free and a tad less regimented will serve us better this time around. And we'll just see what course it takes, won't we?
Indeed.
I mean,
we'll see which way the wind is blowing.
We're going to do a top 10, which I think we'll end up doing over all of the subjects we cover, like TV shows, yogurt brands, etc. But I can't think of a better one to do than music, which I found incredibly difficult, more so than film. And so I do, I guess, want to at some point shout out some bands whom I always thought were top 10 material. In fact, this time around, there are really like more than 10 honourable mentions I could list. And I'm not sure how many I've listed, to be honest. I didn't actually tally them up. But I think because there are probably more, I think I'd really rather just make sure I cover more, but just talk a bit less about each respectively than I did with film. Just so I can make sure I get them all in. Is that cool?
Well, also, I mean, it's fair to say that you've probably got slightly more to say on this subject than I do, so you can pick up the slack.
Yeah, okay. I don't feel any pressure in doing that because, I could wax lyrical about music all day and all night. I'm sure down the line, Lars, we'll get to a subject which is far more your forte, as it were. I don't like the term forte, really, because it's not about that, is it? It's not about knowledge or like even experience and listening to music. It's just about what resonates with you. And have you got it to convey that, which I know you have?
Indeed, exactly. There's just something about some of the music that I enjoy. I think, compared to sort of like classical music, the great depth of strength of the musicianship and the craft and the smoothness, the richness of the sound and the history of the orchestra and all that. And certain albums I like is a bit like
and this is where I'm going to sound like a sanctimonious bastard, because classical is actually only one era of what I think you're calling like orchestral music. Classical is just one period of that. You've got Baroque and all sorts of other things. So I'm going to shut up before people think like, what's this dickhead talking about? I'll tell you what though, Lars, but before we get to like our favourite bands and albums, let's take a quick scenic detour, shall we, down memory lane and talk a bit about our journey of musical discovery, if you like, as we grew up. What got us into music.
Well, I thought this would really be an apt sort of introduction to our series on music, because it was our introduction to music.
Yeah.
And in thinking about some of my favourite albums or albums that I held in high regard, I went back and listened to it, because I thought, well, I can't sign off on something that sort of is almost like a rose-tinted spectacles sort of vibe to it. And I've got to get back into it and open it up and see what's what. And there was more than a few that dropped off that top 10. Great at the time, but it tastes change, and so do the seasons, and keep on rocking, don't you?
I think that's why I think we both thought it would be really good to have this little discussion as an introduction, like you said, because like you, there aren't any in my top 10 that I really had much, if any, knowledge of back then. Some of them weren't even made back then. There are some recent albums in there, but so I mean, would you say this began properly in high school?
Well, yes and no. I mean, like, I remember very vividly, I was around at my cousin's house, and he was playing Boom 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 Shake the Room, Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah.
And I just remember not having heard a lot of, I was quite young, so I hadn't heard any music a lot of music that wasn't sort of nursery rhymes and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh yeah, I'm getting on with this. And I remember, I think it's watching the music video for Supergrass, All Right, when they're sort of like going about on the bed. I don't know why, but that is very heavily ingrained into my brain. I was just like, yeah, that's a good little song. But
Sorry,
Oh,
no,
go on, sorry.
please. No, I was just going to say, yeah, I've got some specific memories of things, which I'll come to in a minute. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do remember both those songs, and I suppose the beauty of that at the time is that, like, you know, as you grow older, you start to bring something to the music you're listening to as well. And like back at that age, if you hear the lyrics tick 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 boom, there's not too much to extrapolate from that, really. You can just take it at face value. You don't have to put your spectacles on and wade into it. So yeah, I do kind of remember hearing both those songs back in that day, whatever that day was, in whatever year that was.
Yeah. As to your question, I think definitely the more I started to move towards teenage years and started to sort of work out who I was as a person a little bit more. Yeah, there's definitely more than a few sort of artists and album that came to mind. I was just like, oh yeah, okay, right, this is rocking with me on a whole nother level now.
I think high school is, I guess, that it begins probably in high school for me in terms of like what I can really remember properly, like connecting with, and also I guess when it became something I was actually really passionate about. Yeah, I don't remember much before then, but I do have two vague musical memories, I suppose, both of which are in my book actually. So for anyone that's come here months down the line off the back of my book's release, I'll try and paraphrase these anecdotes as best I can, because I did include them both briefly in a chapter there. And to be honest, neither of them are exactly ripping yarns anyway. So, but I do smile whenever I look back on these moments. So I'm going to talk about them again. Sue me.
We got to start at the start.
Yeah. So like basically, when I lived way up in Garstang, right, in Lancashire. And for anyone that's interested, Garstang is sort of equidistant between Lancaster, Preston, and Blackpool. It's that area. So there you go. Pow, knowledge. Right. There was a talent competition across all years in the school, and this was around the time that Steps hit the chart with 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, do we all remember that tune? I don't know. Are there any listeners that are old enough to remember that tune? I don't know.
I'm with you.
Or are there any listeners who have blocked it out with some trauma attached to the release of that song? I don't know, but all the popular girls in our year at the time got together and they performed that, you know, learning all the choreography, because it had this, like, it was all about the dance routine really.
Yeah.
But this was also around the time of Euro 96, and Baddiel and Skinner's Three Lions was also in the charts. And this was the first and indeed last time I think I've ever given a public singing performance. Not this time because of any trauma attached, but largely because it was just fucking appalling. Like my rendition played no part in the song's success at the time, put it that way. I was sort of switching key and tempo on a sixpence, and there was no backing track, so it was literally me singing that a cappella in front of the entire school.
Oh God.
And this song had a resurgence, of course, in recent years for World Cup. Was it 2018?
Well, I believe they re-released it for 98 as well, which was when I became more aware of it than 96, because I wasn't really that bothered about football in 96.
But yeah, 96, 98, 2018, whatever. In all of those, once again, football didn't come home as promised. But never mind, we'll gloss over that for now. We'll cover football and sport in another series down the line. But anyway, that was my first ever sort of musical performance. So that's one memory I've got from, you know, at that age. 2 years or so later, I was living back down in this area, just about to join high school. So I think it was year 7. This was at Abbey Park Middle School, which I do briefly write about as well. And I'm about to talk about the first album I ever owned, or at least it was the first one that I remember like asking for as a birthday or Christmas present or something like that. And Loz, are you ready for this?
I'm bracing myself.
It was the seminal debut record from Britney Spears, Baby One More Time. And the single, was it of the same name? No, it wasn't. It was Oops, I Did It Again. So anyway, that single had rocked the charts, and everyone in the year was obsessed with her. Like, all the boys fancied her, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who sort of remembers having the album in my collection, to be honest. But such was my infatuation with her, Loz, at the time, that I actually named a pet after her. And this stuck for quite some time. until we actually learned of her gender, or well, should I say his gender? Because this was a cat, and my favourite cat that I've ever owned by far. And you know what I'm going to say, Lars, but let me at least get to it, because this brings me, I guess, nicely into high school, and when music really started taking over. And you mentioned rap earlier, and this was when I became interested in rap. And so, some year or maybe even 18 months after sort of having Britney in the family, we learned that it was a he, and he became Shady.
Yes, the legend.
I don't want to go off too much here, but just for any animal lovers, I'm sure most people listening have had a cat or a dog, at least one of either, that have just been such a staple part of the family and that they have loved so unconditionally for a big period of their life. And I've had many cats in the family, but Shady was always far and beyond my favorite, like my spirit animal in many ways. You know, he was like my best friend for 16 years. But anyway, I've babbled a bit there.
He was a cat among cats.
Yeah, he was. So, you know, that was kind of two memories that I have of kind of middle school age, but into, I guess, high school now.
Well, I was going to say, can I jump in there, because you've jiggled something loose in my subconscious.
Yeah, take it away.
Because you're talking about hit it, baby. They're talking about talent contests. I know that there's going to be, if there's anyone here that's known me for a long time from Drake's Broughton School days,
which I don't.
No, yeah, exactly. You are not one of those people now. Listen up. I myself participated in a talent contest, which we won, singing Blue Dabba Dee Dabba Die. Was it Eiffel 65?
Eiffel 65, yeah. I was obsessed with that. I practically held my dad at gunpoint to buy me that single. But anyway, I want to hear about your story with this song.
Well, I mean, you might have high hopes of sort of a massive sort of technicolor performance, but it amounted to us putting on blue jumpers and singing the lyrics. So, but yeah, that was sufficient enough for us to sweep the board, and we walked away with the honour of winner. Was it a democratic vote amongst your school friends in the year? I think the crowd went wild. Would be the appropriate term. It was a popular vote. I think it was pretty much who thinks so and so should win.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember who won. I don't think it was me or Steps 5, 6, 7, 8. One of which was my girlfriend at the time, and I seem to remember even back then being a bit disgusted. Like, what is this? Is this what you're into? And I was only at the age of about, I don't know, 9. Mm-hmm. But then on the flip side of the coin, there was me standing there going, "Football's coming home, it's coming home, it's coming home, it's coming." Yeah. Bless your heart, without a backing track as well. Like, I was just like, if the song is playing in the background, you can get away with a lot with that song. But football's coming home, it's coming home. Chip, chip, chow. So, Pershore High School. Can you remember the year that we started there? I can't. I should have looked this up actually, because was it circa 2000? Yeah, I was going to say, I swear our first it must have been login passwords, it was related to the year, and ours was 00. So I think that was 2000 we started. And so, yeah, it was, well, I mean, we don't really need to talk about that stuff. In fact, my book again covers this a little bit, Do you want to kick off here? I don't know. I've got some notes on some bands that I want to talk about during high school, but well, it's a bit tricky for me, considering we've got the top 10 coming on, because there's 2 in the top 5 easily that would have come out around this time, and that were like, definitely, I wouldn't quite say helped mold me into the man I am, but not far off. And there's also, as I say, certain bits of music that certain albums and stuff that I enjoyed at the time, but now listening back, I was a bit like, I can see why I liked it, but I wouldn't listen to it now. I mean, the big thing that I think was such a touchstone for, I think, a lot of people of our age was Linkin Park. I mean, that first Linkin Park album was absolutely everywhere. It was like the Bible.
you know, and I remember great debates about whether you were a Linkin Park person or whether you were a Slipknot person. And there
Or
was,
Papa Roach. I remember
yeah,
Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, which I'll come on to, and
Dirty Boy.
Papa Roach's Papa Roach's whatever it was called, maybe just Papa Roach, I don't know. I remember they came out, I think, in the same month. And I mean, so at the start of high school, Korn and Slipknot were like both popular when we were in that first year, or at least amongst. I know this is going to sound patronising to some maybe, but I feel like the more intellectual people in the year were listening to the likes of Korn and Slipknot rather than, I don't know, NSYNC or whatever was number one at the time.
Oh, Britney Spears.
Yeah, no, see, I'd gone through that phase already. I was above that by that point.
Yeah.
Above and beyond. But Korn and Slipknot, I mean, I love metal and we'll get to that down the line. But at the time, I professed to like both of these bands, if I'm being honest. Like, neither did a great deal for me. I mean, I did still much prefer them at the time to the world of pop, it must be said. But I remember with Korn, it's a Freak on a Leash, and then you had Slipknot with, I think, their first album, and then Iowa came out not long after him. Then 2 albums came along, again, quite, you know, not far from each other time-wise, but they changed like everything for me. And yeah, when I look back on high school, I feel like these are the 2 albums that kind of unified the entire year. And you've just mentioned one of them, and I would love to talk in detail about that in a second. And the other one was Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so I mean, let's address both of these in turn, shall we?
Okay.
Hybrid Theory, Linkin Park's debut. I mean, for me, I can't overemphasize the impact this album had on me. It was like love at first listen with that, and it was the musical sort of epiphany that at the time I didn't even realize I needed. You know, like I said, you know, I did listen to the likes of Slipknot and Korn, and perhaps never fully like sort of desensitized to either of them at the time. I mean, Slipknot kind of always had a bit of an abrasive, aggressive sound, but like, although Hybrid Theory did have like the screams of Chester Bennington, they were juxtaposed with more melodic riffs and obviously Chester's clean voice as well. And then the rappings of Mike Shinoda. It was like a beautiful bringing together of hip hop and metal, as indeed Limp Bizkit were at times.
Indeed.
And it was so damn catchy, wasn't it? It was so catchy.
Yeah, they really hit like a mainstream vein with that one. And it was amazing how universal the appeal was. I think we were all just the right age, because I mean, obviously there's a lot of other bands, I mean, like we talked about before, like Slipknot and Papa Roach. There was certain elements of sort of like teen angst in their music, but there was something about Hybrid Theory in particular that really did speak to me at that time.
Yeah, and if I listen to Hybrid Theory back now, which I did yesterday, there were some things that I probably loved at its, you know, at the time of its inception or release that I don't particularly like as much now, but there are other tracks on there which I still adore. Like, I'll always have a soft spot for this record. I mean, you could argue the melodies were simple at times, but the thing is, I guess guitarist head on now, they were rarely just power chords. Take the first song on the album, and for me, the best thing they ever did, which was Paper Cut. Remember that song?
Mm-hmm.
The chords are gorgeous in that song. They've got depth, and like, and that section towards the end, you know, with like the sun goes down. You know the bit?
Oh,
I tried to do it in key. I don't know if I did or not. I'll have to listen back. But that was me.
I won't hold it against you.
No, that was me at least attempting to sing it the way Chester did, to my own humiliation, I'm sure. But I mean, joking aside now, and I'm seriously joking aside, because obviously those lyrics do have extra poignancy with, of course, Chester Bennington later taking his own life, which I don't know if you remember, Luz, was on the anniversary of the suicide of his best friend, Chris Cornell, who was the vocalist for like Audio Slave and Soundgarden. and Chester took his life on the anniversary of the Chris Cornell's taking of his life. And the thing is, like when Chester died, I'd long since kind of stopped listening to their music, but I genuinely really mourned his death. He was one of my first true heroes, certainly musically. It somehow felt very close to home for me when that happened. I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 3-4 years.
Yeah, it's fairly recent, but yeah.
But I think he had a great voice as well. You know, he knew how to just like hold a note and let the power of that note carry without having to overemphasize for extra value, which, to be honest, wouldn't have been extra value. I mean, if anything, it would be cheap. It'd be the opposite. So, like, Paper Cut is an incredible way to kick off the album. And then it's followed by One Step Closer, which is probably my other favorite on there, to be honest. Like, what a 1-2 knockout punch those two are to kick off this record with. I suppose the interesting thing is that they actually use similar chords, but sufficiently differently. Like, a lot of bands can do this quite effectively, and it doesn't sound for a lack of ideas. So, I mean, like a case in point would be a bit earlier than this album's release, maybe, I don't know, 5-10 years ago. Oasis with what was it? What's the story? Morning Glory, which had Wonderwall on it. Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. Right, and then the big hit from their next album, Be Here Now, was Do You Know What I Mean, which was practically identical. Oh, my people, right here, right now. Do you know what I mean, Loz? Yeah, you can see what I did there. But the thing is, like, they fooled people. I don't know if that's even what they were trying to do. But, like, Do You Know What I Mean is definitely the better of the two tracks. And I'm not saying that to try and be cool or contrary, because, of course, Wonderwall is, like, you know, practically a deity figure in the world of pop song, you know, writing.
Well, it's the one of the two that I'm familiar with.
Oh, Loz, go and listen to You Know What I Mean. In fact, all of you, pause this, go and listen to Do You Know What I Mean? For two reasons. One, you'll realise what I'm saying about just the same chords as Wonderwall. And secondly, you'll realise that it's the better of the two. Like, listen to them side by side. I mean, it was possibly an in-joke, to be honest. You know, I can imagine that being an in-joke, you know. Let's release the same song and see if these schmucks go for it, you know. But anyway,
I was going to say, sorry to jump in on you, but speaking of in-jokes, Wonderwall reminds me of the time where Jay-Z was headlining Glastonbury, and apparently one of the brothers, Noel or Liam Gallagher, had come out and said, you know, oh, what's Jay-Z doing at Glastonbury? It's supposed to be like pop music.
Based on your impersonation, I'd say that's Liam.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're just like, you know, he doesn't play any instruments. And so Jay-Z went on stage and performed Wonderwall, which I was just like, that's such an amazing sort of middle finger move.
Yeah, that's nice.
But yeah, talk about pub trivia. There you go.
Can we just, while we're on the subject of Jay-Z, I saw Jay-Z live in New York.
Yes, you did.
There's a mini story behind this, which I'll try and keep short. Basically, I went to New York with my dad, right? And we realised there was this gig on at Madison Square Garden, which was Jay-Z and R. Kelly. And I said to Dad, "Oh, look, we're here. Can we go to this tonight? Can we get tickets and go to this tonight? Because it will just be such an experience." And one of the worst decisions of his life, I'm sure. But we went, and basically there were loads of other guest appearances from the likes of Ja Rule, Mary J. Blige, and Usher was there. Maybe about a third of the way through the gig, R. Kelly came out and mumbled something into the microphone and then walked off again. I hadn't quite heard what he was saying, but it sounded like he was talking about like someone waving a gun at him or something and be like, "Oh, I can't do this, you know, I'm going." And then he disappeared. The whole gig shut down for about half an hour. And then about 10 minutes into this half an hour, police came out and they started searching the front, like the rows of the audience. And then they disappeared, and probably another half an hour elapsed, and we were all like, what the hell? Like, you know, finally it dawned that something really serious is going on here. And then before we knew it, like Jay-Z and like Ja Rule came back out and sort of finished the gig, you know. And this was an insane gig, you know. A bus came through the back of the stage, and like There was all this pyrotechnica going on. And then that was the end of it, so we thought. We walked away thinking, oh, well, you know, what the hell was that about? Why didn't R. Kelly appear again? Not that I was too gutted. I wasn't there for R. Kelly, to be honest.
No.
I just wanted to see Jay-Z live. Anyway, the next day in the newspapers, we read that R. Kelly had been pepper sprayed backstage by one of Jay-Z's entourage. And it led to this like massive lawsuit, like $1 billion lawsuit, which was like the end of the tour. This was like one of the most expensive tours ever embarked upon, you know, in any kind of music. And we were there at the last night where it just like this big bust up happened, you know, and it was. So yeah, going back to what I was saying, yes, I've seen Jay-Z live once, but anyway.
Yeah, no. that was a segue that was well needed.
Yeah, I hope I've kept that brief. I don't know. It was an interesting experience for me, even if it wasn't for you to just listen to it then.
God bless your dad for taking you to a gig like that. I mean, let's just say I bet you stuck up like sore thumbs.
Yeah, we did. And Cypress Hill and Lost Prophets were playing like down the road the following night, but anyway, we haven't got time. So where were we? We were talking about Oasis, weren't we? But then we were talking about
hybrid theory.
We were talking about Oasis because we were talking about hybrid theory and sort of Paper Cut and One Step Closer being, you know, slightly similar in terms of chord progressions. But I mean, this sort of thing happens time and time again in music, and if you do it well, there's no problem as far as I'm concerned. And I love One Step Closer and Paper Cut. They're my two favorite tracks on the album. I mean, most popular music, you know, reprises things and it's not sufficiently different, and you know, it sounds like a lack of creativity, but it did not sound like that on this album. And then you've got like the other famous tracks, Crawling, In the End, Runaway. I was never quite as keen on those, to be honest. In the End is the one that everyone seems to say was the best thing they ever did. I don't think so.
Well, I was going to say, I was just trying to think back because so many of them I think sort of blur into one. I very much took the album as a whole and listened to it again and again and again. But I think Crawling for me was hell of a song, and as you say, listening to Chester keep that the end of the verse, you know, crawling in my skin. That was really powerful, man.
Yeah, it was great. It was one of the highlights on the album. But I think if anything, I preferred like the remix that came. Do you remember Reanimation, like the album that followed it?
Yeah.
This is quite bold from a band where you've literally released one album and then you release a sort of remix, reimagination of that album before you do your follow-up. And that's what they did. And I think Jay-Z had some involvement in that, actually.
Well, they obviously did their sort of mashups album several years later, for sure. But
and Stained was on that. Do you remember Stained? He had that song.
Yeah.
He had that song that came out. I can't remember what it was, but it just.
I'm on the outside. I'm looking in.
Yeah, that's right. That was
sat on stage with Fred Durst with a lighter.
Yeah, like Kerrang wanted nothing to do with anything else for about a month. It was really irritating, to be honest.
A month?
So
years, mate.
It was just a belter of an album. And I mean, for me, there was only one other that could compete with it at the time. And so should we get on to Chocolate Starfish, Lois?
Yeah, let's please do.
I mean, no, go on, please.
All I was going to say is not only did I like the music of old Limp Bizkit, but at the time for me also, where being a big Undertaker fan and Undertaker coming out to Roll In, I mean, my God, the amount of times I heard that song play through one way or another. I mean, this was just everywhere.
The album was everywhere, wasn't it? It was the album that everyone just thought was cool at the time, and of course that was virtually all that mattered back then. You know, it was an album I remember putting on a school trip. I think it was on the way to like Kingswood or somewhere like that. It was like a weekend of like wall climbing and kayaking and all that bollocks.
Yeah,
and I'm sure it might have even been me that instigated it, to be honest. Such was my obsession. But then everyone was obsessed with it, so it could have been anyone that put this on the bus there. But I do remember this quite vividly. The intro kind of lulled teachers perhaps into a false sense of security, because it's, if you remember, it's just got some alien ramblings over a hip hop beat. You know, like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
reality. But then we go into the opening track, Hot Dog. Do you remember this? I mean, it quite probably still holds the Guinness World Record for the most effing and jeffing. Like,
Yeah.
in particular, effing. I mean, in fact, he ruminates on the use of the word fuck as he's shouting it for about the 68th time. I mean,
48 fucks in this fuck song, I do
it's
believe.
something like that. I mean, it's not Dostoevsky, is it? But it was never meant to be. And again, this like Hyper Theory, it's a great 1-2 punch to introduce you to what this band are all about. And I suppose at the same time, you're also introduced to the riffing and jiffing of Wes Borland, who, as a guitarist, I mean, charge your glasses for the first time in this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Criminally underrated guitarist.
He was the one with the face paint, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I swear everyone was obsessed with him at one point.
Well, he was obsessed with his own like face paint. Apparently, he would like spend hours, before a show, deciding exactly what thing to go with.
Yeah,
but so like, yeah, so that's Hot Dog, a quite unforgettable tune for any parent in the world. But the better known and more popular tracks are obviously to come, and you mentioned one, but you've got like My Generation. Remember My Way, because that's arguably the album's highlight. My Way.
Yeah.
Roll In, as you say, that's probably the one that had like the biggest impact on the chart. Like I mean, that was all that MTV and Kerrang would play for a while.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I've definitely got very, very vivid memories of that video for sure.
You had like Take a Look Around. That was the Mission Impossible one. That was great. But then the track that I'd probably say is my favorite on there now, with hindsight of all these years, Boiler. Like,
yeah,
that again, a bit like Paper Cut, I guess. Simplicity done well, and it's the richness of the chords that kind of carries it, and it's a bizarre Lynch-esque video if you haven't seen it. I mean, I do wonder how many of you will go off and listen to one or both of these albums off the back of me and Lars. I say do it now.
Yeah, why not?
Or add them to a list and make it homework before the next one. So there we go, I guess. They're my two most treasured albums from those years. But I suppose quickly, I just want to say my favorite tune from those high school years was partially involving Linkin Park, and it was, do you remember Executioners? It's Going Down.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
What a song.
That had the DJ, I think, from Linkin Park, and it had Mike Shinoda in it, and then Wayne Static from Static X, another person who tragically took his life. And again, this was so catchy. Again, it was that slightly just marriage of hip hop and metal, which appealed so strongly to me at the time, and this was the perfect synergy of that. It was so catchy. And I mean, if you saw me at the time, walking around school with my headphones in, I was almost certainly, without question, listening to that. I spent about a year listening to nothing else, and I still do occasionally.
You had that album, didn't you? The Executioners album, I swear.
Yeah, I did, and it had a lot more to do with, of course, rap than it did like metal, because Executioners were a bit like Dilated Peoples. They were kind of that. Or even Farside, it was that kind of style of rap, hip hop. But some of Linkin Park and Wayne Static came in for this particular tune, It's Going Down, and I guess that was on that album. And that was all I was listening to for a lengthy period of time.
And just to sort of spark people's nostalgia, one of the things I vividly remember about this sort of high school era of music is you having a mini disc player, and everyone being quite jealous and like people sort of wanting to get on the mini disc sort of wave, and how now, obviously years later, we look back and go, we really thought that was going to be something, and it really wasn't, was it? Bless them. But it was cool at the time. I remember you had quite an extensive library at one point.
Minidisc is long since defunct, and I don't think it was ever even around long enough to have this kind of kitsch nostalgic value for any collectorship purposes, So anyway, yes, mini disc dates us both, doesn't it? Christ.
Yeah, we're old.
So
but yeah, I remember at the time, obviously, I definitely started listening to Eminem as well. That was a big thing around that sort of time. I'm going to lay off on the Eminem front. Just that again, I have a very vivid memory of listening to the Marshall Mathers LP, which must have been one of the first sort of 5 albums I ever bought, sort of on my own back, and listening, desperately, like, putting it straight into the CD player, my Walkman, and listening to it on the ride home, and being like, I really hope my mum can't hear these lyrics. But yeah, no, one of the bands that I've always enjoyed sort of quite performative music. Do you know what I mean? I've always liked to sort of imagine myself in there, and therefore, sort of quite animated, performative bands have always appealed to me. And one of the bands that I started getting into, Disturbed, and I wasn't a metalhead or anything, so I wasn't sort of into their background. And I remember talking to one of our mates at the time who, was a sort of a particular metalhead, and I said, oh yeah, I quite like Disturbed's new album, and the look of disgust that he shot me, and was just like, oh, for God's sake. And that's what high school is all about in some ways, is that you've got tastes, and it might not be to everyone's taste, but yeah, I remember the utter scorn just poured, well and truly pissed on my bonfire, let's put it that way.
To be honest with you, Lars, I will be honest, and nothing else, nothing less, nothing more. Disturbed, I never liked. I mean, I remember the whole, coming down with the sickness. It didn't grab me in the same way that like Linkin Park or Limp Bizkit did. And recently, the Disturbed vocalist, as you may well know, because it was like trending, it went viral, whatever you want to call it.
I can tell you I'm not, because I've not heard anything from him from or about him even. We're not close friends.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
He did a vocal cover of Simon & Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence. And there's I know it sounds totally, opposed to the type of music that he's forged a career out of, but he does this very, well, I say tender. It's like he does this vocal cover, and there's no denying that it's like powerful, and that his vocals are very, very good, but just emotionally it didn't grab me like it clearly did with other people. And maybe it's just because I am such a fan of Simon & Garfunkel, and I'll come to them a little bit down the line, but I love Simon & Garfunkel so much, and I've had some real times with them where they've helped me through some difficult moments in my life, or I've just enjoyed them, during the best periods of my life. And Sounds of Silence is sung very gently and with this harmonic, dual, the two of them, of course, singing is one of the things they were famous for. And when the Disturbed vocalist sings it, it just feels somehow slightly oversung and overly operatic, and it almost seems to go against what the song was about. But it went, like, people went mental for it. Most people must know what I mean here. Yeah, like a few years ago, this was everywhere. But you mentioned Eminem. You mentioned Eminem before that. And I suppose maybe I should hold back on talking about Eminem, but I definitely was one of the people that loved both the Slim Shady EP or Slim Shady LP, and then the Marshall Mathers LP. Yeah, I loved both of those at the same time that Hybrid Theory and Chocolate Starfish came out. That they were the two others, in my Walkman.
Indeed, and again, just a touchstone, because I feel almost sort of bad leaving it out, but something like Dr. Dre's Chronic 2001, which is around about that time, which was just you will hear me talk a lot about that, so we'll leave that right there. But that was a big record at the time.
Nowadays, in fact, I'll stop myself.
Now, something that's just jumped to mind, because I know a lot of people in these formative years, they find themselves in bands. Now, I've got a very, very, very short tenure in, I think, probably one band, which we can get to if you like. But I was just wondering, did you join any bands? I don't think you did, but I just thought I'd throw that in there, in this little melting pot we've got going on.
No, I didn't. This was before I ever picked up a guitar, and I will get to when I picked up a guitar quite soon. But
Hmm.
no, during high school years, I didn't. I mean, there was something you reminded me of the other day, Lars, which I just want to quickly bring up before we forget. You reminded me that I bunked off school for the day
Yes, yeah.
to buy not even an album. It was the single, and it was. This goes against what I said before, but this was Korn, right? But it was the single Here to Stay, which was like the new single off their new album. And actually, if I listen to Korn back now, I would say that Here to Stay is by far the best thing they ever did. But like I said, that's got no bearing on what I was doing at the time. I just literally took the day off school, went on a jolly into Worcester to HMV, and there were a few people involved in this little circle. I was the schmuck who like decided to risk, detention or expulsion, or not expulsion. What's the one where you're temporarily exclusion? Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Would be a report or something.
Yeah, I risked getting into trouble to just piss off
Yeah,
into Worcester.
it was no light thing, was it, to just bunk a day of school, especially at the time. I remember thinking, like, how bold.
But I went into Worcester and I bought this single for about 5 people maybe. And then, but the real audacity was that I turned up in school later the same day. Like,
Yeah.
I got the bus back to Pershore and just rolled into school and just like issued out, here you go, mate, £3, thank you. Yeah, there's £3. Yeah, it was ridiculous, really. Is there anything else on high school that you want to talk about, Lars?
Things are starting to blur in our old age, so I apologize if I've somewhat cocked up the time stream with this, but
well, it was about half our age, wasn't it? Almost, the
yeah,
time when,
exactly.
like, well, certainly halfway through high school, we were half our age, yeah. So, well, no, in fact, when we, oh God, I can't even bother. I don't even want to do the maths, to be honest. No, when we finished GCSEs, we were less than half our current age. Anyway, after high school, we went, of course, to the same sixth form.
Oh yeah.
And it was here that sort of the two biggest musical discoveries of my life happened. But I guess I'll kind of avoid them for now because inevitably they'll come up down the line and I'll talk about them then. But I mean, in terms of other bands around this time, or that were introduced around this time, I mean, for anyone listening who was in our year at sixth form or the one below us, I'm pretty sure you'll remember nothing else other than Lamb of God's Ashes of the Wake playing on the stereo during sixth form. That was pretty much the only thing that ever got any airtime, which is quite amusing, really. It's probably only about 10% of the year actually liked it, but I was one of them. They were undeniably catchy, and they do deserve a mention. I mean, none of their albums will be appearing here on for me, but I do like Lamb of God, and in particular, As the Palace is Burning and Ashes of the Wake. Those two albums were staple, during the sixth form years.
Well, I mean, you're far more tolerant of the harder metal than I am, and there's certain songs I would say by Lamb of God, but I was always sort of a little bit put off by their lead singer. Is it Randy Blythe?
Randy Blythe, yeah.
But yeah, no, I just thought he was a bit of a prick, to be quite honest.
Do you know he got tried in the Czech Republic for manslaughter?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, he was acquitted, and I think rightly so, because there was never any footage and proof of it happening. And bouncers and security chuck people off the stage all the time, and that was what happened. He was involved in like, get this prick off the stage, and then a security guard threw this guy off the stage. He just jumped on stage, and then they later went on to die from head injuries. But that was, I think, a bit of a wake-up call for Randy Blythe, because before that he had hit the booze quite hard, throughout the whole of their career and on tour. If you watch the DVD Philadelphia, you'll see that he was just being a bit of a twat every night.
Which video is it of theirs, which I remember watching with somebody, whether it was you or not, who pointed out to me that, or watching this video, and he's like having a fight with somebody, and it's like his drummer or somebody, and they like fully just like beat the crap out of each other, like as part of the video.
That's Philadelphia. Yeah, someone in the band just punched him and knocked him clean out, and
Yeah.
and then he woke up a bit later, just like, yeah, sorry. That's what I think he was like a lot of the time. But he's been sober for many years now, and I've watched a couple of interviews with him, and he comes across very erudite and articulate, and just very respectful and happy to be open and candid and transparent about all of the things in his life. It's quite fascinating. But yeah, Lamb of God did have this kind of attitude about them. I've listened to a couple of their later tunes, and they sound like totally uninventive rehashes of what they used to do, and nowhere near as good. But back in those days, and I think some of the band members have left now. Chris Adler, the drummer's left, I think, and possibly Willie Abbott, the guitarist, I don't know. But back in the day, there was this little magical period where those two albums came out, and they were great. It was quite a small subset of the year, to be honest, that just for some reason had monopoly over the stereo, and so the
small and vocal subset.
Yeah, and the rest of
they were just closest to the stereo, weren't they? Sorry, I was going to say they were just closest to stereo, weren't they?
They might have been. Maybe that did have some correlation, because of course they would get up and put something on, and then perhaps it was a combination of that and just the reticence from other people to cause any kind of like stir. Just like, oh, I can't be bothered. Let's go and study in there, And then because of that, like a week happened, and then it was as if like, well, this has been set out in stone now. So that's how it's going to be for the rest of the year. Now you've missed your chance to contest the notion of this music being played, so I'm putting it on again.
I would jump in again, because I remember specifically there was once where I'd made an album, and I'm a man who's made some enemies over the years, and I addressed those enemies in an album. And I just walked over to the guys who, most of those guys I was at least on sort of decent terms with. And all right, guys, I'm just gonna pop this CD on if that's all right. And, oh yeah, okay, go. And I just again, I have such vivid memories of standing in front of the CD player with my arms crossed, like periodically looking at the people that I was talking about on these songs, and just like creating a bit of an atmosphere. I'm not a bully, but at that stage, I was responding to people who piss me off with one thing or another. I'll let Jesus decide whether I was right or wrong. But yeah, that's what I was doing, and that was quite highly hilarious, because people. I caught several sort of angry glances, but no one was willing to sort of get up and do anything about it. So, oh, okay, well, you're just going to have to sit there and listen then, aren't you? Oh.
Yeah, it was. I wish I could remember more of those common room, free periods, And of course, it was very dependent on who was free at the time, to state the obvious, because of course you'd have everyone going off doing their own thing, and it's not as if everyone was there at the same time. And so that created these little different equilibriums. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of looking ahead to, well, in fact, I'm looking ahead, but at the same time, I'm looking at that period in sixth form. And like I said, some of the musical discoveries I made along the way. I mean, I discovered the likes of, things like Björk and Kate Bush, around this time. And like sort of branching out from rap and metal, I guess. But I'd say there's only a couple of albums that I was aware of even around this time that have actually made it into my top 10, which I just want to reinforce was a nightmare for me to try and do, to get this top 10 together. So there's going to be plenty of like honorable mentions that didn't quite make it, Lars. So like some that you may be surprised that didn't, and some that you may have never even heard of. I don't know. So I guess when it comes to it, I'll try and whiz through them as much as I can, whilst paying due respect, at the same time, because that probably comes first and foremost to say what I want to say about each band in turn. But
why say it otherwise?
Shall we save that for the next episode?
Yeah, I had noticed we've as ever waffled on quite considerably, but I think we got some good stuff here.
Yeah, with a bit of the usual trimming, it's going to be about typical podcast length. I know the last one we did was feature length, but that was a special episode that was talking about the Loz's 3 greatest films of all time and my 3 greatest films of all time. So that was around the 2 hour mark, but we've kept it around an hour for the others, and let's continue in that form, I say. So
yeah.
Is there anything else you want to round off with, Loz, just on the subject of sort of formative years of musical discovery, or high school, or I don't know, anything?
Well,
you can talk about penguins if you want. I'll cut it out, but
funnily enough, I just like to pay tribute to you in a way, because it's one of the reasons why I've looked so much, been so anticipating your top 10 choices, because I knew you would agonize over it, and therefore it'd be a truly sort of accurate depiction, at least of how you're feeling right now about several artists. But I felt like I was almost like if you understand what I mean, like the tastemaker with some of my friends, where like I put people onto Eminem and stuff like that, and I watched those seeds grow in people, and they were, became real fans. And then, almost it came to a point where people were like, "Oh, have you heard this?" I was like, "Oh no, actually I haven't." Like, what good work. But it always interested me is, I thought I knew my onions, and yet with you, I was always amazed that you were far more willing and brave to sample all sorts of different music. And even if you didn't love it, you were willing to give it a chance, which is something that I can say probably even today I'm not.
Yeah, I love pretty much all forms of music, which is why really this is my series, this one, isn't it? This is where I'm going to get to passionately to wax lyrical about some of these bands that,
But I mean, I think we need to wrap up really, but just for this edition to say, I've been a guide to you in some respects, and you've been a guide to me most definitely. And I hope in at least some small way that we might be a guide to you. And as much as we were looking to invite more good things into your life with our top 10 music albums, that our top 10 films, god damn it, that with our top 10 music albums, that we're inviting yet more joy into your lives. And I hope that's where you will get to.
Yeah, quite. Right, Loz, so before we wrap this up, it's just come to me that there was an album during high school which you and I both kind of experienced together, very much so. And I think you know what it is. And it's when we were on a school trip to Paris. And it was, I think, the day that Busta Rhymes' Genesis was released.
Yeah.
And because it was the day it was released, we went into like HMV in Paris to buy it, did we not?
Yeah. Quite a posh looking HMV with like multiple layers, which is the first, compared to the one in Worcester, was like a treasure trove of music.
Yeah, see, I always think of HMV in Ealing Broadway, which was still not quite on the same level as this one in Paris, if I'm being honest. But yeah, we had a whale of a time on this trip in Paris, just sharing an earphone each, listening to this. And I mean, I remember, of course, the question you posed to me when we went to buy it, which shall I let you do this bit for your own embarrassment?
Well, yeah, please. Well, I remember being stood sort of umming and ahhing, and it was, I think it was quite expensive. I think it was nearly 20 quid. And I remember sort of umming and ahhing. I just remember you being like, and I think you'd sort of gone, "Oh, what's to consider? Either you want it, you don't, Lars. Come on." And I went, "Well, for example, I don't want to get outside and find out that I've bought the French version." And I just remember you absolutely dissolving into laughter, and I just could not figure out why. And after a couple of minutes of you like gasping through your laughs, and finally getting out sort of, "Do you really think that Busta Rhymes has recorded his songs in all different in all different languages throughout Europe?" And as soon as you pointed that out, I realized how truly fucking stupid that was.
Yeah, or it was overdubbed by someone else. In which case, it's not a Busta Rhymes album anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember that so well. And then, of course, that album's got Truck Volume. Is that on that album?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
That album's got some bangers on it. It must be said. But yeah, we had a whale of a time. I mean, yeah, and that's not the only thing that made me laugh in France with you in terms of like.
Oh, of course.
Do you remember we went into McDonald's and we were queuing, and then you decided to order in a French accent, in English, but in a French accent.
It was in Calais at the port, and I was like, right, okay, come on, it's the last chance before we're back over the border, and I just realised that my French was so piss poor that I couldn't actually order properly. So I just went, me being me, I went, I'll meet him halfway. I'll do it in a French accent. So yeah, as Scott says, I'm there sort of, hello, I will have un hamburger and fries, and I will also have chicken and nuggets. As this bloke sort of elbows...
You sounded like Pascal Sauvage from Johnny English.
You just let me twist in the breeze there, sweetheart, didn't you? Yeah. I hope you're pleased with yourself. The French Busta Rhymes album would have been a sight to behold, or to listen to even. But yeah.
Well, Loz, I mean, you and I have one of the funniest experiences of our life together was watching a sort of hip hop gangster film called Baby Boy.
Oh God.
With the German overdub on it, and I don't know what made us do this. I can
explain this. Sorry, I can explain this to you. I do apologize because I bought the film. It's got Snoop Dogg in, so that's a win for me.
Yeah, and Ving Rhames. Is it Ving Rhames? Is he in it?
Yeah, Ving Rhames.
Yeah.
And who's butt naked cooking eggs. Bless him.
Is that when he goes?
I think it might be enough.
I
think it's definitely the same conversation as Das Guns and Butter, baby.
Yeah. Ich hasse Terminus, baby boy.
Yeah.
This is so disrespectful to our swathe of German listeners. This is quite disrespectful. I apologise, and I doubly apologise that I can't apologise in German, just to show that I'm really sorry.
I apologise for nothing. So right, just to take us back. So I bought it, HMV, look good. Like, yeah, okay, sounds. Take it back. I'm watching it through my PlayStation, and what happened was my PlayStation controller dropped off my lap and onto the floor, and one of the thumbsticks clicked in, which I didn't realize was change audio. And so all of a sudden you've got this like growing up in the hood sort of movie narrated, with fully like redubbed German audio. And my God, I mean, some of it, they've got sort of quite excruciating sex scenes in the middle of there. And,
Ich liebe Daddy's Knochen.
Yeah, ich liebe Daddy's Knochen.
Ich liebe Daddy's Knochen.
Just repeated again and again.
That was what made it so funny, which it was because we could visualize that poor bloke in the studio having to do this.
And the guy, as you said before, the guy who was redubbing Snoop Dogg, with Snoop Dogg having one of the most distinctive voices of all time, and yeah, him,
Ik had het Jody. I mean, well, we've gone way off course here. I'll tidy this up. I want to keep this bit about Baby Boy in though, because
yes,
it's it's another experience you and I went through together during those years.
Exactly. And both Snoop Dogg and Tyrese have released music, so there you go.
They have, yeah, they have. So
it all comes together.
Yeah, it's like an episode of Curb Enthusiasm. It's all wonderfully come full circle at the end. And so on that, couldn't have put it better myself. And so yeah, exactly. And so on that note, Loz, I mean,
thank you, Scott.
And many thanks to you, the listener. And we will all reconvene very shortly to get into I think, like I said, I'm just going to read off some bands, and me and Loz will talk about those bands, and then we'll get into serious business with our top tens.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Ta-ra.
Chip, chip, chow.